Today's episode is sponsored by Christina Littleson and The Art Show on Pulse 98.4 FM. Hello and welcome back to Film Pro Productivity and Success, the podcast that helps film professionals and other creative people to live a more focused, effective and happy life. My name is Carter Ferguson and this is episode 60. Is comfort eating you? Yes, and on today's show, as I said there, I'm going to be talking about emotional eating, or comfort eating as it's more commonly known. And this is another episode which I've put together in response to the emotions and stresses that you might be feeling during the current COVID-19 situation. But do not fret if you're listening to this in the future, as this is also a problem that many people have, myself included, in our day-to-day lives as well. In the last episode, which was the second of my interview-based shows, I spoke with keynote speaker and professional mindset coach Dee Blakely on the topic of mindset and how having the correct outlook can help us through our life and our work and our journey towards our success and a productive and happy life as well. So please go back and have a listen to that one if you missed it. Dee was a fantastic guest and will give you a definite boost of positivity if you need it. The subject of today's show always reminds me of the Steve Coogan character Alan Partridge, who was medically addicted to Toblerone at one point. It was a funny concept, but this bad habit can certainly stray into the area of addiction for many of us. Do you think that you eat more when you're feeling stressed? Do you eat when you're not hungry or when you're full? Do you eat to feel better? Do you reward yourself with food? Do you regularly eat until you've stuffed yourself? Does food make you feel safe? Do you feel like food is a friend? Do you feel powerless or out of control around food? How many of you have found yourselves demolishing a packet of crisps or a bag of candy or a tub of Ben & Jerry's after a long, hard day at work? I certainly have. When that starts to become a regular thing, though, then you need to have a good look at what's causing the behaviour. We actually touched upon this topic in the last episode when Dee talked about his short-term Nutella addiction, but listen up as I'm going to go into far more detail at what comfort eating is and what causes it and how we can begin to tackle the problem. Gluttony is an emotional escape, a sign that something is eating us. Peter de Vries, unquote. I don't talk about this that often here, but I was an actor for many years before I started directing films and coordinating fight sequences, and I did rather well at it. But I stopped about 8 years ago in order to concentrate on other things. But it was, for a long time, a very big part of my life. I'll never forget, whilst I trained on the 3-year acting course at Queen Margaret College in Edinburgh, being cast in a play called The Country Wife, however, and struggling so hard with the lines that I started comfort eating to help me along. And The Country Wife, incidentally, is a restoration comedy, it's what it's called, and the language in it, unlike Shakespearean language, which I actually enjoyed doing, was an absolute nightmare to learn. And it wasn't helped by the fact that I'd been cast as a character called Sparkish, which is an excellent and fun part for some people, not for me, but whose dialogue was so shallow that he tended to near repeat himself with very, very slight changes in scene after scene. So remembering these slight variations on what stupid things he said, I found intensely difficult. And I struggled and struggled, but those lines just haunted me. And I remember two things about the play most. One was forgetting my lines during the opening night, only briefly, but you know, I was flying by the seat of my pants because I had such difficulty in pinning them down, and I barely got past what should have been my funniest moment, my entrance. But that's one thing I remember. The other thing that I remember about that production is that I ate my way through it. I had a couple of Mars bars, candy snacks that we get here in the UK. One was never enough, but I had two of them before every show. And it was then that I first realised that I was eating food, bad food, to deal with stress or other emotions that I was going through. Worry and fear, I think, was part of it as well. Luckily for me, though, that run of the show only lasted 5 performances, 5 nights, because if I'd run on much longer, I would have needed fitted for a new costume, if I'm honest. What other dungeon is so dark as one's own heart? What jailer so inexorable as one's self? Nathaniel Hawthorne, unquote. So I've struggled on and off with comfort eating for stress and boredom eating for years now, and it occurred to me that some of you might be going through this too. And as many of you will already have realised, we don't always eat just to satisfy physical hunger. Many of us turn to food for comfort, stress relief, or to reward ourselves. And when we do that, we tend to reach for junk food, sweets, and other comforting and unhealthy foods. Emotional eating refers to when we use food to make ourselves feel better, to fill our emotional needs rather than our stomach. Unfortunately, though, this sort of eating doesn't fix our problems. In fact, it usually makes us just feel a lot worse. Afterwards, not only do we still have the original emotional issue, but we've also got this guilty feeling for overeating. And somewhere down the line, let's be truthful here, we're going to have problems with being overweight and poor fitness as well. I leaned heavily on an article which was in helpguide.org for this show, and it really helped me put it together. But they, within that, others showed it as well, but I'm just going to give them a heads up because they were, I thought, the best article I found. All links in the show notes, as I say. And they've got a diagram of what they refer to as the emotional eating cycle, which I'll post a version of in the show notes. And they say about the cycle, occasionally using food as a pick-me-up, a reward, or to celebrate isn't necessarily a bad thing, but when eating is your primary emotional coping mechanism, when your first impulse is to open the refrigerator when you're stressed, upset, angry, lonely, exhausted, or bored, then you get stuck in an unhealthy cycle where the real feelings or problem is never addressed, unquote. This emotional eating cycle might start with something upsetting you, and for me, this can be just a difficult moment. It doesn't have to be a big thing. It can be a small incident as well that disrupts my happy state of mind. I've had emotional eating triggered by a random email from a difficult client or a nasty online comment, or even just because I have to make a difficult phone call or write a particularly difficult paragraph of this show. The next part of this cycle is an overwhelming urge to eat, and it is overwhelming, isn't it, if you've experienced this? I often find myself on some form of autopilot heading for the cupboard and seeking a snack just because of the small triggers that I mentioned a second ago. The next part of the emotional eating cycle is that you eat more than you should, and that's for sure. In fact, I rarely do this emotional eating because I'm actually hungry. It is, as I've mentioned before in this episode, it's just to keep myself happy, to make myself more comfortable. And the last thing in the emotional cycle is that you feel guilty or powerless over food, and that's something I recognise as well. I can put some controls on it, but it's kind of that autopilot thing I mentioned a second ago. I find I'm powerless to stop myself from eating the next crisp, or the next chip, I should say, if you're from the States or from Canada. And yes, afterwards I do tend to feel guilty or certainly unhappy about what I've done. When people have eating disorders, they can't actually see what they truly look like because they're so clouded in their emotions. Paula Patton, unquote. Emotional hunger comes on suddenly and feels overwhelming and urgent, but just doesn't give satisfaction in the way that actual hunger does. It also craves specific foods such as junk food and sweets that provide an instant fix or sugar rush. It can lead on to more and more snacks without satisfaction, and it isn't located in the stomach. No, the craving comes from your head as your brain seeks specific textures, tastes and smells, and after it all you feel regret and guilt for emotional eating, and it never satisfies you beyond the instant that it's in your mouth. Kirstie Alley said, "My food demons are Chinese food, sugar and butter," unquote. But do you know what your food demons are? Mine are possibly jelly, sweets or candy, chocolate and crisps, or I should say, as I said before, chips for my international friends there. And I think that a good place to start with all of this is to tackle where your head is in all this, and to help this, let's get a look at what the differences are between physical hunger and comfort eating. Emotional hunger comes on suddenly. Physical hunger comes on gradually. Emotional hunger feels like it needs to be satisfied instantly, but physical hunger can wait a little bit. Emotional hunger craves specific comfort foods, but physical hunger is open to options. Lots of things sounds good to physical hunger. Emotional hunger isn't satisfied with a full stomach, but physical hunger stops when you're full. Emotional eating also triggers feelings of guilt, powerlessness, and shame. Eating to satisfy physical hunger doesn't make you feel bad about yourself at all. Now, if you recognise all of that I've been saying there and you're starting to get your head in gear, let's move on now and look at some triggers. Top of my list of triggers is stress, and I'd include anxiety with this one. And stress, when it really gets on top of you, is not just in your mind. Your body produces high levels of the stress hormone cortisol, so it is a physical thing as well as an emotional thing. This is not just something that's in your head. You see, cortisol triggers cravings for salty, sweet, and fried foods, foods that give you a burst of energy and pleasure. There is a very specific physical link to that. The more stress that you feel, therefore, in your life, the more likely that you are to turn to food for emotional relief. This is information worth knowing if you are going to counter the problem. And the next major thing that triggers emotional eating for me is, maybe it's the same for you, boredom. Do you ever eat simply to give yourself something to do? I do. If you feel unfulfilled, dissatisfied, and empty, as many of us in the creative fields do, frankly, all too often, when you get those rejections, I'll be talking about rejections and resilience again in a later episode, but if you ever feel empty, then food is a way to occupy your mouth and your time. It briefly distracts us from the underlying feelings of purposelessness, which come in when you get that rejection for the last script you sent in or the last film you produced or whatever. Anyway, I'm going off track here. If I'm working away from home, is a good example of this, then I'll often binge on snacks in the hotel room after hours, as I feel that I've just got nothing better to do. If I've walked along the promenade or whatever, and I've already done a day's filming, and a day's filming for me is not necessarily what it is for, the camera operator at 11 hours or whatever. I can sometimes do 4 or 5 hours, and that's my day finished, which is all great, but then I've got to fill my day with something else, and I have to admit, sitting in a hotel room and stuffing my face while I watch rubbish TV has happened all too often. Might as well be straight up about it. But have you had this trouble as well? Is it just me? It might even be worse right now because of the lockdown, in fact, because many of us are stuck in the house, perhaps, and boredom could creep up and start to cause this problem. If that's you, hopefully this episode's going to lead you on the way out of that. Now, the next thing that my research suggested as a cause for emotional eating was childhood habits, something that I hadn't considered before. Did your parents reward good behaviour with ice cream or take you out for a pizza when you got a good report card or give you sweets when you were down or upset? Well, these habits can often carry over into adulthood, so you need to watch out for that one, as it might also come in under the radar. Helpguide.org points out that getting together with other people for a meal, although a great way to relieve stress, can also lead to overeating. It's easy to overindulge, they say, simply because the food is there and because everyone else is eating. You might also overeat in social situations out of nervousness, or perhaps your family or circle of friends encourages you to overeat. I've certainly had that issue as well, in fact. And it's easier to go along with the group than to control yourself. So you need to watch out for this one and try to take control if you realise that it's happening. Now, as many of the articles that I've been reading on this topic point out, while you are numbing yourself with food, you avoid the difficult emotions that you'd rather not feel. That's why it's often referred to as emotional eating. So anger, fear, sadness, anxiety, loneliness, resentment, relationship conflicts, work and other stressors at work, fatigue, financial pressures, health problems, and shame, amongst many, many other things, can trigger emotional eating. It isn't just stress-related or boredom-related. This can be activated by any number of things, and you want to be aware of it. You'll know your own bodies yourself as you start to think about this and assess it. But remember the words of John Locke, "What worries you masters you," unquote. So let's get down to the brass tacks of how to deal with all this. Fundamentally, engaging your high-level thinking head is essentially if you're going to tackle it. Also, you might want to go back and check those episodes of mine that deal with habit, as in order to stop this from happening, you need to put serious time and effort into breaking any bad habits that you've gotten into. D. Blakely talked about this in the last show. He had rewired his brain to stop him going for the Nutella, the chocolate peanut spread thing, by instead training it to go to peanut butter. So he was slowly tricking his brain over time into not following his old habits. And this is exactly the thing that those earlier episodes cover. For now, though, here are a few solutions. The first suggestion that I've got here is to stop and think for 5 minutes before you give in to this craving that I'm talking about. Helpguide.org says that emotional eating tends to be automatic and virtually mindless. Before you even realise what you're doing, you've reached for a tub of ice cream and polished off half of it. But if you can take a moment to pause and reflect when you're having the craving, you can give yourself the opportunity at least to make a different decision, unquote. So when you feel this coming on, try putting it off for 5 minutes, or if you can't manage 5 minutes, just go for one minute. And try taking a glass of water in that 1 minute as well. An exchange of another item like Dee was using for a lesser evil might help to wean your mind away from the bad choice to something better. And I'm totally aware that your resolve at these times will likely be very, very low. So to help it along, perhaps placing a "don't eat or think for 5 minutes" sign that you've handily prepared earlier on the fridge or the cupboard door where you keep the biscuits would be a good thing to do. When you see that, you'll force yourself to wait, and while you're waiting, you can check in with yourself. How are you feeling? What's going on emotionally? And give the craving time to pass. At least then, even if you end up eating, you'll have had an understanding of why you did it, and you'll be more aware of what happened. And this can help you set yourself up for a different response the next time. If you're having difficulty telling real hunger from emotional hunger, then MayoClinic.org suggests keeping a food diary. Write down what you eat, how much you eat, when you eat, how you're feeling when you eat, and how hungry you are. Over time, you might see patterns that reveal the connection between your mood and food. And with all of my suggestions that involve writing stuff down, I realise that you possibly can't be bothered to do it. But please remember that when you write stuff down, you are 42% more likely to do it. I know sitting here suggesting you keep a food diary sounds like the most tedious thing you could possibly do, but if you're serious and you need to solve this problem, then it's something you need to start considering. Probably the main thing that I do to stop emotional eating is to take away temptation. Don't keep hard-to-resist comfort foods in your home. And I've done this for many years, as I figured if I really want some candy, the walk to the shops and back will at least counter some of the negative effects of the food. They say that you should never do your weekly shop as well while you're hungry, and I couldn't agree more with that one. But at the same time, it possibly should be said that you shouldn't do your weekly shop if you feel angry or upset. If you're feeling any of the emotions like this that trigger emotional eating, then you need to probably postpone your trip to the grocery store until you have your emotions in check. Have you ever went shopping like this and returned with ice cream and other comfort foods, possibly even at the cost of what you actually went there for? Well, if that's you, like it is for me sometimes as well, then be aware of this one and watch out. Eating is a natural way to feel happy. Overeating isn't. Deepak Chopra, unquote. The next obvious tip that I can think of is to try and reduce your stress or other triggering emotion. If stress contributes to your emotional eating, try a stress management technique such as yoga, meditation, or deep breathing. This podcast exists to try and help you reduce these feelings of stress to some extent, so try and create a life where stress isn't in control of you. I'll be doing an episode, as I said before, on stress very soon, so look out for that. It's already prepped, and I've just put it aside whilst I dealt with the more immediate issues arising during the current crisis, but it's coming very, very soon. Now, next up, try getting some support, because you're more likely to give in to emotional eating if you lack a good support network. Lean on family and friends, or consider joining a support group. I've definitely found this tricky in the past, I've got to be honest, as some people around me just can't accept that I am sometimes unhappy about my weight, and they constantly sabotage my efforts to lose weight or keep control of my eating by gifting me snacks, etc., that they know that I like. This can be very frustrating, even though for them it does come from a good place. But if it's happening to you, you must have a serious talk with them. If you've tried self-help options but you still can't control emotional eating, then really you should consider therapy with a mental health professional. Therapy can help you understand why you eat emotionally and learn coping skills. Therapy can also help you discover whether you have an eating disorder, which can be connected to the emotional eating. And as I've said before in this show several times, therapy is not something to be ashamed of and can be far cheaper than you think it's going to be. Now, if boredom eating is your problem, then instead of snacking when you're not hungry, try distracting yourself and substituting a healthier behaviour. Take a walk, or listen to music, or read, or have, like I suggested, a glass of water. If you can distract yourself, then this substitution technique when it comes to emotional eating can be very, very helpful. And the other notable thing that I've come across during my research is to not deprive yourself. When trying to lose weight, you might limit calories too much, eat the same foods repeatedly, or banish treats altogether. But this might serve to increase food cravings, especially in response to emotions. So eat satisfying amounts of healthier foods, enjoy an occasional treat, and get plenty of variety to help curb these cravings. On a similar note, you should snack healthy. If you feel the urge to eat between meals, choose a healthy snack such as fresh fruit, vegetables with low-fat dips or nuts, or try lower-calorie versions of your favourite foods to see if they satisfy your craving. On films that I've produced, by the way, and directed, I try to make sure that there are bottles of water and fruit options for the cast and crew to eat rather than just sweets and coffee and biscuits, as the energy from the fruit releases at a slower rate and stops sugar crashes, making the team sleepy and unfocused. Quentin L. Cook said temporary setbacks are overshadowed by persistence. And as the journey to stop your emotional eating is possibly going to be fraught with setbacks, I want you to make plans to move past them. If you have an episode of emotional eating, you must forgive yourself and start fresh the next day. Try to learn from the experiences, though, and make a plan for how you can prevent it in future. Focus on the positive changes you're making in your eating habits and give yourself credit for making changes that'll lead to better health. If you take the time to, in effect, agree a contract with yourself to reduce or remove emotional eating from your life, then you are far, far, far more likely to achieve it. Within this contract, make it a written contract, but within it, you can plan out how you're going to do this with strategies derived from the suggestions that I've given you. And I remember, I said it a minute ago, if you write it down, you're 42% more likely to do it. If you write it down, I find, if you plan it, then you can more easily move forward instead of getting stuck thinking about it. To be successful, you have to believe in yourself and stay motivated by an ongoing belief that you can accomplish anything that you set out to do. You can't be happy and successful all the time. That's just not realistic. But you can learn to focus on your successes, not on your failures. You can push yourself to keep seeking solutions rather than losing hope or giving up when you hit an obstacle. Susan McQuillan, unquote. So I really want you to get that high-level thinking head on and take control of your life. You know, seize control, seize the day, as they say. Make a commitment to strategize your way out of this, perhaps most difficult of problems. And as you do this, I can assure you that I am going to try and do it too. I really don't choose these topics lightly, and I definitely have an issue with emotional eating. As always, I really hope that you found this episode to be informative and engaging, and I wish you very well in dealing with whatever eating habits or disorders that you might have. And I found an awesome website whilst researching this show, so if you want to know more about this topic, then go to www.beateatingdisorders.org.uk if you need help on this, or indeed any other kind of eating disorder, for some great advice from a wonderful charity. I'd like to give a very big shout out today to Yorkshire man and creative soul James MacDonald, who is at 00JamesMac, that's MAC, on Twitter, for being the very first person to take me up on my challenge to screen grab the show as you listen to it on your phone, on your podcast app, and post it on social media with a link to where it can be listened to by your friends, etc. I really, really appreciate the support, James. Promoting this show, I have got to be 100% honest, is just killing me on top of the creation of these episodes, and I am very, very grateful for the time that you took to do that. And if anyone out there wants to help the show, please consider doing the same for a shout out like this in a future show. Today's sponsor is the very awesome Christina Littleson, who presents the arts show on Pulse FM. That's Pulse 98.4 FM, which covers the west of Scotland. And you can also get it anywhere on the planet via the TuneIn app or on their official website at pulseonair.co.uk. She's got guests, chat, film and TV reviews and recommendations, what's on, and more stuff related to film, theatre, music and all other forms of the arts. And she goes live on Mondays between 1pm and 3pm, and you can find out more about her show on Facebook or on that official website pulseonair.co.uk, but on Facebook at facebook.com/artsonair. Now, I don't do these promotions for people lightly, but Christina has been a tremendous supporter of the show over the years, and I am more than happy to give her this little bit of promotion back. I'll be back in a few days with another new episode to help you through the current crisis or through life in general. It's an interview show with one of my very favourite trainers, one of my very favourite people perhaps as well, but he's a trainer who works with freelancers working in the media industries. David Thomas of David Thomas Media, and I think I'm going to have that one going out on Thursday. Seriously, you do not want to miss this one. It's excellent. I recorded it on Friday and it's very, very current. After that show, though, I will be returning to the normal slot of one show per week, releasing on Sundays at 7pm. Much as I enjoy giving up every single minute of my day to this podcast, I really have to focus on promotion. Putting shows out without the promotion to back them up, although is good for the people who are already subscribed, is kind of dissatisfying for me as a creator, and I did want to go through this season with a promotional strategy. So I'm going to slow down, build that promotional strategy, and try and build more listeners to the show. For now, though, I will end with some more words of wisdom from someone I regularly quote from. It's Helen Keller, who said, "All the world is full of suffering. It is also full of overcoming." Now, don't worry, folks. Everything is going to be all right. Just take control of your own destiny. Keep on shooting. And join me next time on Film Pro Productivity and Success. The music that you're listening to right now is Adventures by Ehimitsu. You can view the show notes for this episode on the official website, filmproproductivity.com. You can follow my personal account on Twitter and Instagram at fight_director, or follow the show, the official account, on Twitter at FilmProProdPod or on Facebook at FilmProProductivity. Please support the show, continue to support it by subscribing, spreading the word. Please tell people about the show and leaving me an awesome review.